Okay, welcome to challenge number 2 for the Self-Love Lab. This challenge is about reframing our thoughts. So let's start with a little bit before I get on to what you actually are going to be doing. So we have on average 70,000 thoughts a day, which is crazy. Well, it's possibly why we feel a bit crazy because it's just endless. It just keeps going. And of those 70,000 thoughts on average that we have, over 50% of them are thoughts that we've already had. So, from the previous day. And our minds are wired as human beings to gravitate towards the negative stuff, towards pain, towards discomfort, towards being uncomfortable. So to actually train your brain to look for the positive, to look for the benefit, to look for the good, is actually a really is something that you really have to work with. Because our minds are just constantly bombarded with negative thoughts, visions of things that might happen to us. Well, that certainly happens to me because I catastrophize, with my anxiety. And reasons why not to do the things that we want to do. Now, they're not necessarily terrifying reasons, but they're absolutely reasons, which I'm too late, I'm too this, I'm too old, I'm too short, I'm too whatever. But in the end, those things that we worry about so much and the things that we, our negative thoughts, quite often, there's absolutely zero basis in it. And that, the worst part about having those thoughts is that they just constantly are there and they disturb us and they take up space and energy for us to do other stuff, but we never actually do anything about them. So this is where it's about to change. There is a very powerful technique known to us as reframing. Now, I work with some school psychologists, and one of them is powerfully proficient at reframing stuff. And, just par for the course, a bit of osmosis working with her, my reframing is certainly getting better, and I'm far more aware of it. So what reframing does is it involves us identifying our unhelpful thoughts and thought patterns and replacing them with more positive or adaptive ones. Yep. So when is reframing useful? You can literally reframe anything and any thought that you have into something far more positive. So, but you don't have to. And so what we are starting to do is to actually raise our awareness around some of those negative thought patterns that we have. And then your challenge is going to be to change some of them. So, but if you listen long enough to some of your thoughts, you'll probably notice that there are actually a bloody lot of negative thoughts that we have. So I'm not asking that we're going to go from, all of these negative thoughts to no negative thoughts, because that's not being human. What I'm doing is raising your awareness to the number of negative thoughts that we have. And then when you catch yourself, we're going to flip it on its head and reframe it. Okay, so some of the negative thought patterns that we can have. So you may have heard about limiting beliefs or self-limiting beliefs. So limiting beliefs or self-limiting beliefs are a thought that actually prevents you from working towards your full potential. So they're the thoughts like, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I am too old, all of those sorts of things. And the consequences of actually believing that narrative means you get paralyzed and you stop. Yeah? You stop working towards what you want to achieve because you actually buy into it. So when you reframe a limiting belief, you start to weaken that belief and strengthen the belief that who cares if you're 50? Who cares if you are a certain height? Who cares? And so you reduce the chances of your limiting beliefs stopping you. Yeah? Okay. Limiting beliefs are one of the ones that really hold us back. There's also the sorts of beliefs that you wish that something acceptable was better. So have you ever had a really fun night staying somewhere, but you felt like you missed out the next day when you heard something cool that your friends had done? We tend to beat ourselves up, and it's a little bit of FOMO, the fear of missing out. So even though you might have had a really good time, at home, hanging out, doing the stuff you wanted to do, you're kind of like, I missed out on whatever it was. So what I'm going to say is big deal, but it's still an opportunity to reframe it. And then there's the other type of negative thoughts are around specific problem areas. So it might be, this can be related to self-limiting beliefs, but it doesn't actually have to be. So perhaps that you're working on some part of your life, you want to lose weight. You want to go to the gym, but it's raining outside and you don't want to get wet. So in this situation, you would use reframing as a way to motivate yourself to go to the gym. So it's kind of like we are installing some software in our head that, so I'm not, as I said before, I'm not asking you to reframe everything, but I'm just going to get you to firstly notice how many negative thoughts come into your head, given that we have 70,000 on average a day of thoughts, and then go, wow, this is an opportunity for me to reframe. You may also find that you have a negative self-thought patterns and those sorts of things when you are, it might be, as you're getting ready for work or whatever, or it might be when you're driving to work, or it might be around going to the gym, or you like there may be sections of your life where you really notice that the negative stuff. So then you can actually start to think of some ways to reframe that. So in terms of reframing it, okay, a reframe is far more effective when you actually understand what's going on with the thought behind it. So just know that, like if you say that, I'm too old to do water skiing, for instance. It's not that you inherently believe that, but you've attached some story to it. So it's about how you've interpreted that. And that could be a throwaway comment from somebody. It could be, that you've seen somebody water skiing and they were 50 odd or whatever. And you're like, oh, the silly old goat shouldn't be doing. I don't know where some of your negative thought patterns have come from, but it's about just knowing that it's because how you've interpreted some event. Okay. The second is that there's always a positive intention behind every negative thought. So it's because that inner critic, and I call it one of ego's dirty tricks that are in the bag. I talk about ego is just trying to help you out somehow, but it's ego's dirty tricks, and we'll cover that when we get together on our Q&A. So ego's trying to make you do something. It doesn't make it wrong, doesn't make it right, but what it does is that inner voice is something that you really need to tune into, because you will be surprised at how often that inner voice, that little bloody ego, tries to stop you or influence you. Okay, so how do you observe your negative thoughts? So there's a couple of ways, and you can use one or the other, or you can use them both. It's It's whatever is going to work for you. So if you've never tried to pick up on your negative thoughts before, these 2 strategies that I'm going to give you are a really good way to start. I don't need these strategies anymore. I haven't for years, because I am really tuned into myself and I just go, oh God, yeah, geez, you're being really negative, Leanne. So negative thoughts are going to pop up in your mind a gazillion times a day. And they will usually follow the same patterns. So it might be around the same context, as I said, maybe driving to work, or maybe it's going to the gym or whatever, waiting for a piece of equipment at the gym. And they usually sneak up on us before we even realize it. So we're going to put a stop to that. So here's a couple of ways that you can start to observe your negative thoughts. You can keep a thought journal. So you can kind of, keep a small notepad in your pocket or your bag or on your desk so that's available at all times. And what you do, anytime that you notice a negative thought come up, you just write it down in your journal. This immediately stops the negative thought in its tracks, okay? By sheer virtue of the fact that you've recognized it, so it stops it. It also allows you to analyze after you've been collecting the negative thoughts, and notice if there's common problem areas, if there's some trends, there's some patterns, or if there are some self-limiting beliefs that you need to work on. So if you wanted to do that, which, I know that that's not necessarily the easiest way to do it, particularly if you're out and about and working and doing loads of things. So what you can do is so if you wanted to be able to write the thought down, which is awesome because then you get a record and you can help track your the trends and the way that your head works, is to kind of draw up a day, like on a piece of paper, a day, and it might be, before lunch and after lunch or something, just sections of your day so that you can kind of break it down so you can kind of see if there are pockets of patterns. Another way that you could do it is just to have a little piece of paper, and every time there's another thought, there's another thought, there's another thought, and tally them. Because you might actually be surprised. So we're not actually writing down what the negative thought is, but you might actually be really surprised about how often a negative thought pops into your head. Now, with that, we're not being judgmental. We're just simply collecting data, because data will inform us. Yep. The next strategy is to use a rubber band. Now, I'm just looking, I did have a hair lacquer here, but it's gone. Is that you just pop a rubber band around your wrist. Now, it may seem a little bit childish, possibly even a little bit silly, but I can tell you this is one of the quickest ways to actually change a behavior. So you wear it around, it should be tight enough so that it can stay on, but not so tight that it cuts off blood flow. And so that when you pull it, you just ping it, sorry. And also not too tight, and make sure it's comfortable and that it's not going to break. So anytime you have a negative thought, you just give the rubber band a snap. Yep. Like writing it down, it stops the negative thoughts in its tracks immediately. But what it also does is conditions you to have less negative thoughts in the future. So you've got 2 options, a journal with a couple of variations, or the rubber band. So if you want to do a double whammy, you can do the rubber band and the journal, but it's entirely up to you. So replacing the negative thoughts with positive ones. So those 2 strategies that I've just mentioned with their variations is that it's going, wow, bang, there's another one, another one, another one. So the best part of this is that, right, so you've noticed that you've got these negative thoughts. Well, then we need to reframe it and replace them. So this is what you want to be able to do and have a practice with. So So one of the strategies is use milder language. Like if you come home and say, I've had an absolute shit day, a reframe of that could be, a section of my day was really crappy, but the rest of it was okay. Yeah. Can you see how I've reframed it? Otherwise, it makes it look like I've had a crappy day, a shitty day for the entire 24 hours, when in actual fact, that's not what it is. So if you were to think, I really hate that person, you could reframe it by saying, I'm not a fan of that person. Okay, so it's milder language. You might ask yourself, so if you are facing a challenge or a fear, you could ask yourself, what's the best way for me to accomplish this, as opposed to, I'm going to fail this. And the best way, by using the phrase best way, that implies that there are multiple ways and not just one, and keeps it focused on the positive. Another thing that you can do is to ask yourself, what can I learn from this? So instead of having a problem, you actually reframed it that you actually have an opportunity to learn something or to improve yourself. So take advantage of that. And actually challenge, another one is to challenge your assumptions. Trying to figure out what is behind the thought is really powerful. Chances are that you possibly have a limiting belief that's encouraging you to think negatively about a situation, because the limiting belief is based on some assumptions that you've probably made that aren't true. So there's a couple of techniques, there's a couple of ways, so now one of the things that I do is I could, when I'm caught in traffic, I could actually go, this traffic, but I actually reframe it and I go, what else can I do to help make this as pleasant as possible? And so, I might put on a podcast, or I might ring a friend, or I might actually just be really mindful and look at what's going on around me, and really tune in, look at the cars, or look at the people in the cars, or the birds in the sky, or whatever it is. But this is an opportunity to reframe those negative thoughts. So what I want you to do is, in the comment box, I want you to tell me what your strategy is. Is it going to be a journal, or tallying one of the variations, or are you going to try an elastic band? That's all. You just put journal, elastic band, or both, if that's what you're going to do, a double whammy. And then what I want you to do, so this is something that's going to continue for the 66 days as well, is I want you to also identify some of how you've been able to reframe. So just maybe put what the statement or the thought was, and then an example of your reframe. Okay, I look forward to finding out how you're going. Speak soon. Bye-bye.